The stagecoach lurched to a stop in front of the general store, and Isaac Thorne looked up from the harness he was mending to see a woman stumble down onto the frozen ground, her threadbare shawl doing nothing against the bitter January wind that howled through Newton, Kansas. It was 1876, and the winter had been particularly harsh that year, with snow piling up in drifts that reached the windowsills and temperatures that made even the hardiest ranchers think twice about venturing out. Isaac had been checking on supplies in town when the coach arrived, 3 hours late and covered in ice. The woman who emerged looked like she might shatter if touched, her lips blue, her fingers curled into rigid claws as she tried to grip her single carpetbag. She wore a dress that might have been elegant once but now hung on her thin frame, torn at the hem and stained with road dust and worse. Her dark blonde hair had come loose from its pins, whipping around a face that was pale as death itself. "Miss, you all right?" Isaac called out, dropping the harness and moving toward her. He was tall, broad-shouldered from years of ranch work, his dark hair touching his collar beneath his wide-brimmed hat. At 26, he had seen his share of troubles, but something about the way this woman swayed on her feet made his heart clench with concern. She turned those wide green eyes on him, and he saw the fear there, raw and primal. "I." Her voice came out as barely a whisper, chattering through frozen lips. "Please is there. Somewhere safe." Before he could answer, her knees buckled. Isaac lunged forward, catching her before she hit the icy boardwalk. She weighed almost nothing in his arms, and he could feel her trembling violently against his chest. Her skin felt like ice even through the layers of clothing. "Doc Harrison." Isaac shouted toward the office 3 doors down. "Doc." The elderly physician emerged, took one look at the scene and waved Isaac inside. "Bring her in, quickly now. Looks like hypothermia and God knows what else." Isaac carried her into the warm office, laying her gently on the examination table. The doctor immediately began checking her vital signs while Isaac stepped back, though something kept him from leaving entirely. He watched as Doc Harrison worked, noting the bruises that showed at her wrists when the doctor pushed back her sleeves, the way she flinched even in her semi-conscious state. "She's half frozen and half starved," Doc Harrison muttered. "Isaac, run and get some blankets from my back room and tell Martha to heat up some broth. This girl needs warming up slowly or it'll shock her system." Isaac did as instructed, moving through the familiar motions while his mind raced with questions. Who was she? Where had she come from? And why did she look so terrified? When he returned with the blankets, the woman's eyes had opened again. She looked around wildly, trying to sit up, panic clear in every movement. "Easy now," Doc Harrison said gently. "You're safe here. This is Newton, Kansas. You came in on the stage." I cannot pay," she whispered, and Isaac heard the refined accent underneath the exhaustion. This was an educated woman, someone who had known better circumstances. "I have nothing, but please do not send me back, please." "Nobody's sending you anywhere in this condition," the doctor said firmly. "Now lie still while we get you warmed up proper." Isaac found himself speaking before he quite meant to. "Miss, you are safe here. I promise you that." Her eyes found his, searching his face for something. Whatever she saw there must have reassured her because some of the tension left her shoulders, though she still trembled. "Thank you," she breathed. Over the next hour, Isaac stayed while the doctor worked. Martha Harrison, the doctor's wife, brought warm broth and helped the young woman sip it slowly. Gradually, color returned to her cheeks, though she still shook with cold that seemed to go bone deep. She told them her name was Lily Kensington, that she was 22 years old, and that she had fled from St. Louis. When pressed for details, her eyes filled with tears and she turned her face away. "That is enough questions for now," Martha said firmly, shooting her husband a meaningful look. "The girl needs rest. She will need somewhere to stay," Doc Harrison said, looking at Isaac. "The boarding house is full up with those railroad surveyors, and I do not have room here." Isaac heard himself speaking again, the words coming from some deep place he had not known existed. "My ranch is 3 miles outside town. I have a spare room, a housekeeper who lives there. Mrs. Chen, widow of one of my old ranch hands. It is warm, there is plenty of food, and nobody will bother her there." "Isaac, that is generous," but the doctor began. "I will not go where I am not wanted," Lily said quietly, trying to push herself up on her elbows. "I have already caused enough trouble." "You are wanted," Isaac said, then felt his ears heat at how that sounded. "I mean, you are welcome. The ranch is big, plenty of space. You can rest there, get your strength back, figure out what you want to do next. No obligations, no expectations." Lily studied him with those remarkable green eyes, and Isaac felt something shift in his chest. This woman had been through hell, that much was clear, but there was strength underneath the fear. A core of steel that had not broken, despite whatever had driven her onto that frozen stagecoach with nothing but a carpetbag and terror in her eyes. "Why would you help me?" she asked. "You do not know me. Because you need help," Isaac said simply. "And because out here we take care of our own. You are in Newton now, that makes you one of us." Something in her eyes softened, and a single tear tracked down her pale cheek. "You promise I will be safe?" "I promise," Isaac said, and meant it with every fiber of his being. "You will thaw here, Miss Kensington. I give you my word." By the time they left the doctor's office, wrapped in borrowed blankets, and with a bag of medicines and instructions from Doc Harrison, the sun was setting over the snow-covered prairie. Isaac had brought his wagon into town, and he helped Lily up onto the seat, noting how she still moved stiffly, her body not yet fully recovered from the cold. He tucked blankets around her carefully, then climbed up beside her and took the reins. The drive out to the ranch was quiet, the only sounds the crunch of wagon wheels on snow and the occasional snort from the horses. Isaac glanced over at Lily several times, but she stared straight ahead, her expression unreadable. He wanted to ask 100 questions, but respected her silence. Whatever had happened, she would tell him when she was ready. If she was ever ready. The Thorne ranch came into view as they crested the last hill, and Isaac felt the familiar surge of pride he always did when seeing his home. It was not the biggest spread in Kansas, but it was his, earned through years of hard work after his father had died and left him with nothing but debt and a half-finished cabin. Now the main house stood solid and strong, built from good timber and stone, with smoke rising from the chimney. The barn was newly painted, and even in winter, the corrals and fencing looked well maintained. He ran cattle mostly with some horses, and employed 3 ranch hands who lived in the bunkhouse. "It is beautiful," Lily said softly, speaking for the first time since they had left town. "Thank you," Isaac said, pulling the wagon up to the front of the house. "Come on, let us get you inside where it is warm." The door opened before they reached it, and Mrs. Chen appeared, a tiny woman with iron-gray hair and sharp dark eyes that missed nothing. She had come to Kansas with her husband 20 years ago, working on the railroad, and when he had died in an accident 5 years back, Isaac had offered her a place to stay in exchange for cooking and keeping the house. It had been the best decision he had ever made. Mrs. Chen ran the household with quiet efficiency and a warm heart. "Isaac, who is this?" Mrs. Chen asked, taking in Lily's condition with one comprehensive glance. "This is Miss Lily Kensington. She needs a place to stay for a while. Can you set up the spare room? Already warm and ready, Mrs. Chen said, ushering them inside. "I always keep it prepared. "Come, Miss Kensington, you look like you need a hot bath and a proper meal." Lily looked overwhelmed by the warmth and kindness, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I do not know how to thank you." "No thanks needed, Mrs. Chen said firmly. "In this house we help those who need it. Now come along." As Mrs. Chen led Lily away, Isaac stood in the front hall watching until they disappeared up the stairs. His foreman, Jack Sullivan, emerged from the kitchen, raising an eyebrow. "Found yourself astray?" Jack asked. He was a decade older than Isaac, weathered and practical, and had been with the ranch since the beginning. "She needed help," Isaac said, hanging up his coat and hat. "Came in on the stage, half frozen and terrified of something." "You always did have a soft heart for creatures in trouble," Jack said, but his tone was not unkind. "Just be careful, boss. Woman that's scared is usually running from something, and sometimes that something follows." Isaac nodded slowly. He had thought of that, but looking into Lily's eyes, he had seen only a desperate need for safety, not deceit. Still, Jack was right to be cautious. "Keep an eye out, especially at night. If anyone comes around asking questions, I want to know about it." "Will do," Jack said, heading back toward the bunkhouse. Isaac climbed the stairs a while later after Mrs. Chen had called down that Lily was settled. He found the older woman in the kitchen, preparing a tray. "She is in the bath now," Mrs. Chen said quietly. "Isaac, that girl has been hurt. I saw the bruises when I helped her undress. Someone has been hitting her, and recently." Isaac's hands clenched into fists. "Did she say who?" "No, and I did not press. But she flinched when I moved too quickly, and she kept apologizing for causing trouble, as if expecting to be punished for existing." Mrs. Chen's expression was troubled. "Whatever she ran from, it was bad. Then we make sure she knows she is safe here," Isaac said firmly. "Nobody touches her, nobody scares her, nobody makes her feel unwelcome. Pass that word to the hands." "Already done," Mrs. Chen said. "Now go wash up for dinner. I am making extra, and that girl needs feeding up. She is too thin by half." Dinner that evening was a quiet affair. Lily came down in a borrowed nightgown and robe of Mrs. Chen's, her hair damp and loose around her shoulders. She moved carefully, as if still testing whether this safety was real. Isaac and Mrs. Chen kept the conversation light, talking about the ranch and the weather and the town, never pressing for information about where Lily had come from or what she was running from. Isaac found himself watching Lily more than he meant to, noting the delicate structure of her face, the way her hands shook slightly as she lifted her spoon, the guarded expression that never quite left her eyes. She was beautiful, he realized, even exhausted and frightened as she was. But more than that, there was something about her that called to something deep in him, a protectiveness he had never felt so strongly before. "Tomorrow I will show you around the ranch if you feel up to it," Isaac said as they finished the meal. "It is not much, but it is peaceful. Good place to rest and recover." "I would like that," Lily said quietly. "Mr. Thorne, I need you to understand something. I cannot go back to where I came from. I cannot. If anyone comes looking for me, then they will not find you," Isaac said firmly. "You have my word on that, Miss Kensington. Whatever you are running from, it stops here." Her eyes filled with tears, and she blinked them back rapidly. "I do not understand why you are being so kind to me. You do not know me. I could be anyone." "You are someone who needed help," Isaac said. "That is all I need to know." That night, Isaac lay in his bed, staring at the ceiling and thinking about the woman sleeping in the room down the hall. He had never been one for flights of fancy or love at first sight, but something had shifted when he caught Lily in his arms that afternoon. Some fundamental change had occurred that he could not quite name, but felt in every cell of his body. He wanted to protect her, yes, but more than that, he wanted to see her smile, to hear her laugh, to know what had put that terrible fear in her eyes so he could make sure it never touched her again. He was in dangerous territory, he knew. She was vulnerable, fleeing from something terrible, and the last thing she needed was him developing feelings for her. But as he finally drifted off to sleep, it was Lily's face he saw and the memory of her words. "You promise I will be safe." He would keep that promise, no matter what it cost him. The next morning dawned clear and cold, the sun glittering off the snow like diamonds scattered across the prairie. Isaac was up early as always, tending to the animals and checking on his small herd before breakfast. When he came back to the house, stamping snow from his boots, he found Lily already in the kitchen, helping Mrs. Chen with breakfast preparations. She looked better than she had the night before, he noted with satisfaction. Color had returned to her cheeks, and though she still moved carefully, there was more life in her eyes. She wore one of Mrs. Chen's dresses, altered to fit her slimmer frame, and had her hair pulled back in a simple braid. "Good morning," she said, offering him a tentative smile. "I hope you do not mind me helping. I am not used to being idle." "Mind? Not at all," Isaac said, hanging up his coat, "though you should still be resting." "I have rested enough," Lily said firmly. "I am not an invalid, Mr. Thorne. I may have arrived here in a sorry state, but I am stronger than I look." There was steel in her voice, and Isaac found himself liking her even more for it. "I do not doubt that, Miss Kensington, but there is no rush. Take your time healing." Over breakfast, Lily began to relax more, asking questions about the ranch and the surrounding area. Isaac found himself talking more than he usually did, enjoying the way she listened with genuine interest, asking intelligent questions that showed she was paying attention. After the meal, true to his word, he took her on a tour of the ranch. She had borrowed a heavy coat from Mrs. Chen, and they walked through the snow, their breath misting in the cold air. Isaac introduced her to the ranch hands, Jack and the two younger men, Tom and Pete, who tipped their hats respectfully and went back to their work without staring or asking questions. Lily seemed to truly come alive outdoors, despite the cold. She exclaimed over the horses, laughing when one of them nuzzled at her pockets looking for treats. Isaac found a couple of wrinkled apples in the barn and showed her how to feed them with a flat palm, standing close behind her to guide her hand. He was acutely aware of her nearness, the faint scent of the lavender soap Mrs. Chen used, the way her hair caught the sunlight. "I have never been on a ranch before," Lily said, stroking the horse's nose gently. "In St. Louis I lived in the city. This is so different. So much space, so much sky." It was the first time she had mentioned where she had come from, and Isaac did not press for more. "Kansas takes some getting used to," he said, "especially in winter. But come spring, when the prairie blooms, there is no prettier place on earth." "Will I still be here in spring?" Lily asked quietly, not looking at him. "That is up to you," Isaac said, "but you are welcome to stay as long as you like." She did look at him then, searching his face with those remarkable green eyes. "Why, Mr. Thorne? You keep saying I am welcome, but you must want something. Everyone wants something." Isaac considered his words carefully. "I want you to feel safe," he said finally. "I want you to heal from whatever hurt you, and I want you to have the chance to decide your own future without fear or pressure. That is all." "That is not a small thing," Lily whispered. "That is everything." They stood there in the barn, the horses moving quietly in their stalls, and something passed between them. An understanding, a connection that Isaac felt all the way to his bones. He wanted to reach out to take her hand, to promise her that he would move heaven and earth to keep her safe. But he held himself still, knowing it was too soon, that she needed time and space and safety before anything else. "Come on," he said gently, breaking the moment. "Let me show you the rest of the property before we both freeze solid." The days that followed fell into a comfortable routine. Lily helped Mrs. Chen around the house, though the older woman made sure she did not overwork herself. She was recovering, gaining weight and color, the shadows slowly lifting from her eyes. Isaac found excuses to be near the house more often than strictly necessary, and they fell into the habit of taking afternoon walks when the weather permitted, talking about everything and nothing. Isaac learned that Lily had been educated at a finishing school, that she loved to read, that she had a quick wit and a surprisingly dry sense of humor once she felt comfortable enough to show it. She learned that he had built this ranch from almost nothing, that his mother had died when he was young and his father had drunk himself to death 5 years ago, leaving Isaac with a mountain of debt that he had worked himself nearly to death to pay off. She learned that he loved this land with a fierce passion, that he treated his animals and his employees with respect and kindness, and that he had a habit of rescuing strays, from the barn cats to the half-wild Mustang he was slowly gentling in the far corral. What Isaac did not learn was the full story of what Lily was running from. She mentioned St. Louis occasionally, spoke of a childhood that sounded lonely despite its privilege. But whenever the conversation veered too close to recent events, she would change the subject or grow quiet. He did not push. She would tell him when she was ready. 3 weeks after Lily's arrival, a stranger came to the ranch. Isaac was in the barn, working with the Mustang when Jack came striding in, his expression grim. "Boss, there is a man at the house. Says he is looking for a young woman who might have passed through Newton. Says she is his wife and she ran away." Isaac felt his blood run cold. "What did you tell him?" "Nothing yet. Sent Pete to get you, but Isaac, he has a badge. Says he is a deputy marshal from St. Louis." "Hell," Isaac breathed. He stripped off his work gloves and headed for the house at a near run, Jack following. The man standing in Isaac's front hall was well dressed in a city suit, with slicked back hair and cold eyes. He was perhaps 40, with a hard mouth and a badge pinned prominently to his vest. When Isaac entered, those cold eyes assessed him with the efficiency of a snake sizing up prey. "Mr. Thorne," the man said, "I am Deputy Marshal Crawford. I am looking for a woman, early 20s, blonde hair, green eyes. She may have arrived in Newton about 3 weeks ago. Have you seen anyone matching that description?" Isaac kept his expression neutral, though his heart was pounding. "Why are you looking for her?" "She is my wife," Crawford said flatly. "Lily Crawford. She is not well, not in her right mind. She ran away from our home in St. Louis, and I have been tracking her ever since. I need to bring her home, get her the help she needs." Every word was reasonable, but Isaac heard the lie underneath. The way Crawford's hand flexed, the hardness in his eyes, the possessive way he said, "my wife." This was the man Lily was running from, he was certain of it. "I have not seen anyone like that," Isaac said, keeping his voice steady. "The stage came through 3 weeks ago, but I was not in town that day. You might check with the boarding house or the saloon. People pass through Newton all the time." Crawford's eyes narrowed. "You are certain?" "Because I have reason to believe she might have come out this way. Pretty thing like her, alone and desperate, might have looked for help at her ranch." "If she did not come here," Isaac said firmly. "Now I have work to do, Marshal, if you will excuse me." "Of course," Crawford said, but he made no move to leave. "Nice place you have here. Must take a lot of work to keep it running. Be a shame if something were to happen to it." The threat was clear, and Isaac felt his temper rise, but he forced himself to stay calm. "Is there something else, Marshal?" "Just making conversation," Crawford said, that cold smile never reaching his eyes. "I will be staying in Newton for a few days, asking around. If you do happen to see my wife, you will let me know, won't you? There is a reward for information leading to her return, $500. I will keep that in mind, Isaac said, opening the door pointedly. Crawford finally left, but not before taking a long, slow look around the property. Isaac watched him ride away, then strode into the house, taking the stairs two at a time. He found Lily in her room, pressed against the wall beside the window, her face white as snow. She had heard everything. "He found me," she whispered. "Oh God, he found me." Hey, it is all right," Isaac said, though he kept his distance, not wanting to frighten her further. "I did not tell him you were here. He has no proof, just suspicion." "You do not understand," Lily said, and her voice was raw with terror. "He will not stop. He will never stop. And he is not really a marshal. He bought that badge or stole it or God knows what. But he is not a lawman." "He is," she broke off, wrapping her arms around herself. "Tell me," Isaac said gently. "Let me help you, Lily, but I need to know what we are dealing with." For a long moment she just stood there, shaking. Then the words came tumbling out in a rush. "His name is Richard Crawford. He was a business associate of my father's in St. Louis. After my father died 2 years ago, he started courting me. I was alone, I had no other family, and he seemed kind, respectable. He asked me to marry him, and I said yes because I thought I had no other choice. The marriage would secure my inheritance, you see, my father's money." She took a shuddering breath. "But as soon as we were married, he changed. He was cruel, controlling. He hit me if I spoke out of turn, locked me in my room if I displeased him. He said I was his property now, that everything I had was his. And then I found out. He had been stealing from my father's business for years. That was why he wanted to marry me, to cover up what he had done and get control of the money. I confronted him, and he—" Her hand went to her throat, and Isaac saw the faint yellow remnants of bruises there that he had not noticed before. "He tried to kill you," Isaac said, his voice deadly quiet. "He said I was going to have an accident," Lily whispered. "That I would fall down the stairs and it would be tragic, but these things happen. And then he would have everything. But the housekeeper heard him. She helped me escape, got me onto that stage with nothing but the clothes on my back and what little money she could scrape together. I have been running ever since, terrified he would find me. And now he has," Isaac said. "But Lily, listen to me. He is not taking you back. Do you hear me? I will not let that happen." "You cannot stop him," Lily said, tears streaming down her face. "He has money, power, connections. And I am just—" "You are not just anything," Isaac said fiercely. "You are brave and strong, and you deserve so much better than what he did to you, and I am not going to let him hurt you again." He wanted to go to her, to hold her, but he stayed where he was, letting her have her space. "Do you trust me?" he asked. "I do not know why," Lily said, her voice breaking, "but yes, I trust you." "Then trust that I will figure this out. We need to go into town, talk to the sheriff, make sure everyone knows the truth about Crawford. A man like that, throwing around threats and intimidation, he has probably made enemies. And Kansas law does not look kindly on men who abuse their wives." "We were married in Missouri," Lily said hopelessly. "He has papers, legal documents that say I am his wife, his property." "This is not Missouri," Isaac said. "And you are not anyone's property. Come on. Let us go talk to Sheriff Morrison. He is a good man, and he does not take kindly to bullies." An hour later, they were in Sheriff Morrison's office in Newton. The sheriff was a grizzled man in his 50s, with sharp eyes and a reputation for fairness. He listened to Lily's story without interruption, his expression growing darker with each word. "I have heard of Richard Crawford," Morrison said when she finished. "He came by here yesterday, flashing that badge and asking questions. Something about him set my teeth on edge. That badge looked wrong, for one thing, and no real marshal would be chasing down a wife on his own like this. He would go through proper channels." "So you will help?" Isaac asked. "I will do what I can," Morrison said carefully. But Mr. Thorne, you need to understand the law here. If they were legally married and he has documents to prove it, there is not much I can do to stop him from taking her back. Women do not have a lot of rights in marriage, even out here." "That cannot be right," Isaac said, his frustration evident. "She is in danger. He tried to kill her." "I believe her," Morrison said, "but it is her word against his, and he has got that badge and those papers. Best I can do is make his stay here uncomfortable, let him know he is being watched. Maybe he will give up and go back to St. Louis." "He will not," Lily said quietly. "He needs me dead to get the money. He will not leave until he has me." The three of them sat in heavy silence for a moment. Then Morrison leaned forward, his expression thoughtful. "There might be one way," he said slowly. "If Mrs. Crawford were to become someone else, legally speaking, then those marriage papers would not hold water." "What do you mean?" Isaac asked. Morrison looked between them. "I mean, if she were married to someone else. A divorce takes time and requires both parties to agree, which Crawford never would. But if she married someone else, someone here in Kansas, that would supersede the Missouri marriage in Kansas courts. It would give her protection under a different name, a different legal status." Isaac's heart began to pound. "Are you suggesting—" "I am suggesting that if Miss Kensington here were to become Mrs. Thorne, then Crawford would have no legal claim on her in this state. It would not be permanent if you did not want it to be. Could get an annulment later once Crawford gives up and goes home, but in the meantime it would protect her." Isaac looked at Lily, who was staring at the sheriff in shock. That is asking too much," she whispered. "I cannot ask Mr. Thorne to marry me just to protect me from Richard." "You are not asking," Isaac said, his voice steady despite the chaos in his chest. "I am offering. If you will have me, Miss Kensington, I would be honored to marry you and give you the protection of my name." "You barely know me," Lily said, though her eyes were searching his face desperately. "I know enough," Isaac said. "I know you are kind and brave and you deserve to be safe. I know I would rather marry you 1,000 times than let that man lay another hand on you. But Lily, it is your choice. It has to be your choice." She was crying again, but this time there was something like hope in her eyes. "Are you certain? This will change your whole life." "I am certain," Isaac said, and realized he meant it with every fiber of his being. "Will you marry me, Lily Kensington?" "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I will." Sheriff Morrison nodded with satisfaction. "Judge Harris is in town today, over at the courthouse. He can marry you within the hour and we will file the papers immediately. Make it all legal and binding. Crawford will not be able to touch you." An hour later, Isaac Thorne and Lily Kensington stood before Judge Harris in the small courthouse in Newton, Kansas. Mrs. Chen and Jack served as witnesses, having been hastily summoned from the ranch. The ceremony was brief and businesslike, but when Isaac spoke his vows, promising to honor and protect Lily for as long as they both lived, he meant every word. And when Lily repeated her own vows, her voice shaking but clear, he saw something in her eyes that made his heart soar. "I now pronounce you man and wife," Judge Harris said. "Mr. Thorne, you may kiss your bride." Isaac hesitated, not wanting to presume, but Lily stepped closer and lifted her face to his. The kiss was gentle, chaste, barely more than a brush of lips. But it sealed something between them, a promise beyond the legal words they had just spoken. They signed the papers, and Sheriff Morrison took them immediately to file. As they emerged from the courthouse into the cold afternoon, Isaac saw Richard Crawford standing across the street, his face twisted with rage. "You," Crawford snarled, starting toward them. "What have you done, Mr. Crawford?" Sheriff Morrison said, stepping between them. "I suggest you move along." "She is my wife," Crawford said, but there was desperation in his voice now. "Actually, she is my wife," Isaac said, putting his arm around Lily's shoulders. She pressed against his side and he could feel her trembling. "We were just married, legally and properly. The papers are filed with the county. You have no claim here." Crawford's hand moved toward his gun, and instantly Sheriff Morrison's weapon was drawn and leveled. "I would not," Morrison said calmly. "That badge you are wearing is fake, Mr. Crawford. I wired St. Louis this morning. There is no Deputy Marshal Crawford in their records. So right now, you are just a private citizen threatening two good people in my town, and I do not take kindly to that." For a moment, Isaac thought Crawford might try something stupid. The man's face was purple with fury, his hand still hovering near his gun. But Morrison's weapon never wavered, and finally Crawford stepped back. "This is not over," he hissed at Lily. "You think you can run from me. You think some Kansas cowboy can protect you. I will make you pay for this." "That is enough," Morrison said. "You have until sundown to be out of Newton, Crawford. If I see you in this town after that, I will arrest you for disturbing the peace and impersonating an officer. And believe me, those charges will stick." Crawford gave them all one last hateful look, then turned and stalked away. They watched him go, and Isaac felt Lily sag against him. "Is it really over?" she whispered. "It is over," Isaac said, though he was not entirely certain himself. Men like Crawford did not give up easily, and his threats had sounded genuine. But for now, Lily was safe, legally bound to Isaac and under his protection. They rode back to the ranch in the wagon, Mrs. Chen fussing over Lily and telling her what a fine match she had made. Jack rode alongside, his rifle across his saddle, keeping watch. When they arrived home, Mrs. Chen immediately began preparing a celebratory dinner, insisting that even a hasty marriage deserved proper recognition. Isaac and Lily stood together in the front hall, suddenly awkward with each other. They were married now, legally and in the eyes of God, but it had all happened so fast that neither of them seemed to know what came next. "I will stay in my room," Lily said quietly. "I know this is not a real marriage, not the way you might have wanted." "You do not have to, Lily," Isaac interrupted gently. "This marriage is real in every way that matters legally, but you are right that the rest of it, the personal part, that is up to us. I married you to protect you, yes, but I want you to know that I do not regret it. And whatever happens next, however we figure this out, I am glad you are here." "I am glad too," Lily said, and there were tears on her cheeks again. "Isaac, I know I have not said it properly, but thank you for everything. For catching me that first day, for taking me in, for believing me, for marrying me. You have given me my life back." "You are welcome," Isaac said. Then, because he could not help himself, he reached out and gently wiped the tears from her face with his thumb. "No more tears. You are safe now. You are Lily Thorne, and you are home." That night, they had a quiet dinner, just the four of them, Isaac, Lily, Mrs. Chen, and Jack. Mrs. Chen had outdone herself, preparing a feast despite the short notice, and even opened a bottle of wine that had been sitting in the cellar for years. They toasted the new couple, and slowly, the tension began to ease. Lily even laughed at one of Jack's stories, a genuine laugh that lit up her whole face and made Isaac's heart skip a beat. Later, after Mrs. Chen had retired and Jack had gone to the bunkhouse, Isaac and Lily stood together by the fire in the front room. The house was quiet around them, peaceful in a way that felt almost sacred. "I have never had this," Lily said softly, staring into the flames. "A home. A place where I felt safe and wanted. My father loved me, I think, but he was always busy, always working. And after he died, there was only Richard, and that house was never a home. It was a prison." "This is your home now," Isaac said, "for as long as you want it to be." She turned to look at him, and in the firelight her eyes were luminous. "What if I want it to be forever?" Isaac's breath caught. "Lily, I know this started as an arrangement," she said quickly. A way to protect me from Richard, but Isaac, you are the kindest man I have ever met. You have shown me more genuine care and respect in 3 weeks than I have known in my entire life. And I think I am starting to fall in love with you. You think, Isaac said, his voice rough with emotion. Because I am fairly certain I have been falling in love with you since the moment I caught you outside the general store. Really? Lily whispered. Really? Isaac said. He took her hands in his, marveling at how small and delicate they were. I know this is complicated. I know you have been through hell. But Lily, if you are willing, I would like to make this marriage real. Not just on paper, but in every way. I want to court you properly, get to know everything about you, and let you get to know me. I want to wake up next to you every morning and spend every day trying to make you happy. I want to build a life with you, a real life, full of love and laughter and everything you have been missing. Yes, Lily breathed. Yes, I want that too. I want all of it. Isaac pulled her into his arms, holding her close, and this time when he kissed her, it was not the chaste brush of lips from their wedding. This was deeper, fuller, a kiss that spoke of promises and passion and a future they would build together. Lily kissed him back with equal fervor, her arms going around his neck, and for a long moment they stood there by the fire, lost in each other. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Isaac rested his forehead against hers. We will take this slow, he promised. As slow as you need. There is no rush. I know, Lily said, and I appreciate that, but Isaac, I am not made of glass. I am not going to break. I know that too, Isaac said with a smile. You are the strongest person I know. They stood there together for a while longer, talking quietly, making plans. Then Lily yawned, exhaustion catching up with her, and Isaac walked her to her room. He kissed her goodnight at the door, a sweet, gentle kiss that promised more for the future. Good night, Mrs. Thorne, he said. Good night, husband, Lily replied with a smile that made his heart soar. Isaac went to his own room, but he did not sleep for a long time. He lay in bed, thinking about the woman down the hall who was now his wife, and about the future that stretched before them. It had started with fear and desperation, but somehow it had become something beautiful. Something worth fighting for. The next few weeks passed in a haze of happiness that Isaac had never known before. True to his word, he courted Lily properly, despite the fact that they were already married. He brought her wildflowers he found growing improbably in sheltered spots, despite the snow. He taught her to ride, spending patient hours in the corral with her and a gentle mare named Daisy. He rode to her in the evenings by the fire, and she rode to him, their voices weaving together in the quiet house. Lily bloomed under the care and attention. The fear gradually left her eyes, replaced by confidence and joy. She laughed often now, a musical sound that Isaac quickly became addicted to. She worked alongside Mrs. Chen in the house, but also began helping with the animals, proving surprisingly adept at handling the horses. She had a gentle way with them that reminded Isaac of his mother, who had been able to calm the wildest stallion with just a soft word and a gentle touch. They grew closer every day, learning each other's habits and quirks and preferences. Isaac discovered that Lily sang while she worked, soft little songs that she claimed were off-key, but which he found charming. Lily learned that Isaac was surprisingly well-read for a cowboy, with a collection of books in his room that rivaled any library she had seen. They discovered a shared love of the stars, and on clear nights they would bundle up and stand in the snow, looking up at the vast Kansas sky while Isaac pointed out constellations and told her their stories. But underneath, the happiness was a current of tension that had nothing to do with fear and everything to do with the growing attraction between them. They were married but still sleeping in separate rooms, and the restraint was beginning to wear on both of them. Isaac caught himself watching Lily more and more, noticing the curve of her neck, the way her dress hugged her waist, the soft pink of her lips. And he noticed her watching him too, her gaze following him when he worked, lingering on his hands, his shoulders, his mouth. It all came to a head one evening in late February. They had been married for 3 weeks, and the pretense of their arrangement being temporary had long since worn thin. They were in the front room after dinner, and Lily was reading aloud from a volume of poetry while Isaac pretended to mend a bridle but was really just watching her. She finished a particularly romantic sonnet and looked up to find his eyes on her. "What?" she asked, a slight blush coloring her cheeks. "You are beautiful," Isaac said simply. "I know I have told you that before, but I do not think I tell you often enough." "Isaac," Lily said, setting down the book, "I think we need to talk." "All right," Isaac said, his heart beginning to pound. Lily stood and crossed to where he sat, kneeling beside his chair so she could look directly into his eyes. "I am grateful for your patience," she said, "for giving me time and space to heal. But Isaac, I am healed, or at least I am healing enough, and I do not want to wait any more." "Lily, what are you saying?" "I am saying that I love you," she said, her voice steady and sure. "I am saying that I want this marriage to be real in every way. I want to move into your room and wake up beside you. I want to be your wife truly and completely, if that is what you want too." Isaac cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs stroking her cheeks. "Are you sure? I do not want you to feel pressured or like you owe me anything." "I do not feel pressured," Lily said firmly. "I feel loved and safe and happy, and I want to share all of that with you. I want to build a life with you, Isaac, a real life starting tonight." "Then yes," Isaac said, his voice rough with emotion. "God, yes, that is what I want too." He kissed her then, deep and passionate, and Lily responded with equal intensity, her hands going to his hair, his shoulders, pulling him closer. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Isaac stood and lifted her into his arms, making her laugh. "What are you doing?" "Carrying my wife to our bedroom," Isaac said with a grin. "Seems like the proper thing to do." That night, they came together as husband and wife in every sense of the word, their joining tender and passionate and full of love. Lily had been nervous, Isaac knew, haunted by her experiences with Crawford, but he was patient and gentle, taking his time, making sure she felt safe and cherished every moment. And when they finally came together, it was perfect, a union of bodies and hearts and souls that left them both shaken and awed. Afterwards, they lay tangled together in Isaac's bed, Lily's head on his chest, his arms around her. He could feel her heart beating against him, the soft warmth of her breath on his skin. "I love you," she whispered into the darkness. "I love you too," Isaac said, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "More than I ever thought possible." "I never thought I could have this," Lily said. "After everything with Richard, I thought I would spend the rest of my life afraid, alone. But you changed everything, Isaac. You gave me hope again. You gave me love." "You gave me those things too," Isaac said. "I was just going through the motions before you came. Working the ranch, getting through each day. But now I have a reason for all of it. I have you." They fell asleep wrapped in each other's arms, and for the first time in longer than either of them could remember, they both slept peacefully, with no nightmares and no fear. Life settled into a new rhythm after that. Lily moved her things into Isaac's room, and they became a true married couple in every sense. The ranch hands noticed the change, the way Isaac and Lily looked at each other, touched casually as they passed, the sound of laughter coming from the main house. Mrs. Chen just smiled knowingly and made sure to give them plenty of privacy. Winter began to loosen its grip on Kansas, and as February turned to March, the snow started to melt and the first hints of green appeared in sheltered spots. Lily had been with them for 2 months now, and it was as if she had always been there. She was part of the ranch, part of their lives, and Isaac could not imagine it any other way. They had heard nothing more from Richard Crawford since that confrontation in town. Sheriff Morrison had reported that Crawford had left Newton the day after their wedding, and there had been no sign of him since. Isaac wanted to believe that meant he had given up, but something nagged at him. Men like Crawford did not let go easily, especially when there was money involved. His concerns proved justified in mid-March. Isaac had ridden into town for supplies, leaving Lily at the ranch with Mrs. Chen and the hands. He was loading the wagon when Sheriff Morrison came striding up, his expression grim. "Isaac, we have a problem," Morrison said without preamble. "I got a wire this morning from the marshal's office in St. Louis. Seems there is a warrant out for Lily's arrest." Isaac felt his blood run cold. "What? On what charges?" "Theft," Morrison said. "Crawford is claiming she stole a significant amount of money from him before she ran off. He has papers, documents that he says prove it." "That is insane," Isaac said. "She did not steal anything. It was her money, her inheritance from her father." "I believe you," Morrison said, "but the law is complicated, Isaac. They were married, which means under Missouri law, what was hers became his. If he can prove she took money that legally belonged to him, even if it came from her father originally, then technically she committed theft." "So what does this mean?" Isaac asked, fighting to keep his voice steady. "It means that if Crawford comes back with a real marshal and proper paperwork, I will have to turn her over for extradition back to Missouri," Morrison said. "I am sorry, Isaac. I know it is not right, but my hands are tied." Isaac stood there for a long moment, his mind racing. Then he looked at the sheriff. "How much time do we have?" "Hard to say. Could be days, could be weeks. Depends on how long it takes Crawford to get the extradition papers processed and find a real marshal willing to come out here. But Isaac, you need to prepare Lily. She needs to know what is coming." Isaac thanked the sheriff and finished loading the wagon with hands that wanted to shake. Then he drove back to the ranch, trying to figure out how to tell his wife that the nightmare she had escaped might not be over after all. Lily knew something was wrong the moment she saw his face. They had been married long enough now that she could read him easily, and Isaac saw the fear flash in her eyes before she controlled it. "What happened?" she asked as soon as they were alone in the house. Isaac told her everything, watching her face grow pale. When he finished, she sank down into a chair, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "He is not going to stop," she said quietly. "I told you he would not stop." "We will figure this out," Isaac said, kneeling in front of her and taking her hands. "There has to be a way to fight this." "How?" Lily asked, and there was despair in her voice. "He has the law on his side, Isaac. He has documents, papers, proof that I was married to him and that I took money." "It does not matter that it was my money. Under the law, I am a thief." "Then we get a lawyer," Isaac said. "We fight the extradition. We prove that you were fleeing for your life, that he tried to kill you." "With what evidence?" Lily asked. "The word of a housekeeper back in St. Louis." "Even if she would testify, which she cannot without losing her position, it is still just my word against his. And he is a respected businessman with connections. I am nobody." "You are not nobody," Isaac said fiercely. "You are my wife, and I will not let him take you." "You might not have a choice," Lily whispered, and tears began to slide down her cheeks. "Isaac, I am so sorry. I should never have let you marry me. I have brought nothing but trouble to your life." "Do not say that," Isaac said, pulling her into his arms. "Marrying you was the best decision I ever made, and we are going to get through this, do you hear me? I promise you, Lily, we will find a way." But even as he held her, Isaac felt the fear gnawing at him. What if they could not fight this? What if Crawford really could force Lily to go back to Missouri? The thought of her in his hands again, of Crawford finally getting what he wanted, made Isaac feel physically ill. That night, they lay in bed holding each other, neither able to sleep. Lily was silent, but Isaac could feel the tension in her body, the way she pressed against him as if trying to memorize the feel of him. "Isaac," she said finally, her voice small in the darkness, "if they do make me go back, promise me something, anything. Do not follow me," she said. "Do not try to rescue me. Richard will kill you if you do, and I could not bear that. Promise me you will stay here, stay safe." "I cannot promise that," Isaac said. "If they take you, I am coming after you. Nothing on this earth could stop me." "Isaac, no," he said firmly. "I love you, Lily. You are my wife, my partner, my everything. I am not losing you, not to Crawford, not to the law, not to anything. We are in this together, whatever comes." Lily started to cry then, deep sobs that shook her whole body. Isaac held her through it, murmuring words of comfort and love, wishing he could do more. When she finally cried herself out, she fell into an exhausted sleep, but Isaac lay awake for hours, his mind working through possibilities and plans. The next morning, he rode out before dawn, leaving a note for Lily that said he would be back soon. He rode hard, making it to the neighboring town of Wichita by mid-morning. There, he sought out a lawyer he had heard about, a man named Thomas Granger, who had a reputation for taking on difficult cases and winning. Granger listened to Isaac's story with a thoughtful expression, taking notes and asking occasional questions. When Isaac finished, the lawyer sat back in his chair. "This is indeed a difficult situation," Granger said. "The law regarding marital property is clear and Crawford seems to have his documentation in order. However, there are some angles we might pursue." "Such as?" Isaac asked. "First, we can argue that the money was taken before the marriage was legally dissolved, which means Lily had a right to access funds from her own inheritance. Second, we can introduce evidence of Crawford's abuse and his intent to do her harm, which would suggest she was fleeing for her life rather than committing theft. Third, we can challenge the validity of the Missouri marriage itself on the grounds that it was entered into under duress or false pretenses." "Can you make those arguments stick?" Isaac asked. "I can try," Granger said, "but I will be honest with you, Mr. Thorne. Even with all of that, there is a good chance the extradition will go through. The courts generally defer to other states in these matters, and Crawford seems to have influential friends. Your best hope is that we can drag the proceedings out long enough that he gives up, or that we find some other leverage to use against him." "What kind of leverage?" Isaac asked. Granger gave him a long look. "The kind that comes from digging into a man's past and finding things he would rather keep hidden. A man like Crawford, who is willing to forge documents and impersonate an officer, he has likely done other things, things that could be used against him if we could prove them. How do we do that?" Isaac asked. "We hire an investigator," Granger said. "Someone who can go to St. Louis and dig into Crawford's business dealings, talk to people who know him, find evidence of fraud or embezzlement or anything else we can use. It will not be cheap, and there are no guarantees, but it is your best chance. Do it," Isaac said. "Whatever it costs, I will pay it. I am not letting him take my wife." Granger nodded and made more notes. "I will start the paperwork today to contest any extradition order that comes through. And I will contact an investigator I know in St. Louis, get him started on looking into Crawford. In the meantime, make sure your wife stays close to home. The last thing we need is for her to be arrested before we have our case built." Isaac thanked the lawyer and rode back to the ranch, arriving just after dark. Lily met him at the door, worry clear on her face. "Where have you been? I was so worried." I went to Wichita, Isaac said, drawing her into his arms. Hired a lawyer to fight the extradition and an investigator to dig into Crawford's past. We are not giving up, Lily. We are going to fight this with everything we have. Relief and love shone in her eyes. I do not deserve you. Yes, you do, Isaac said, kissing her softly. And I am going to make sure you get to keep me. The next few weeks were agonizing. Every day they expected a marshal to show up with papers, but none came. Isaac began to hope that perhaps Crawford had run into delays, or that the investigator had found something useful. But the waiting was hard on both of them, especially Lily. She tried to go about her daily routines, helping with the house and the animals, but Isaac could see the strain in her eyes, the way she jumped at unexpected sounds. Then, in early April, news came that changed everything. The investigator Granger had hired sent a telegram, asking for an urgent meeting. Isaac rode to Wichita immediately, and what he learned there made his blood boil and his heart soar in equal measure. Crawford was a fraud. A complete and utter fraud. The investigator had uncovered a trail of deceit going back years. Crawford had been embezzling from multiple businesses, forging documents, and using assumed identities to cover his tracks. The inheritance from Lily's father had been meant to be his final score, the one that would let him disappear with enough money to live comfortably for the rest of his life. When Lily had fled, ruining his plans, he had become desperate. But more than that, the investigator had found evidence that Crawford's marriage to Lily might not be legal at all. There was a woman in Chicago who claimed to have married Crawford 5 years earlier, and she had documents to prove it. If that marriage had never been dissolved, then Crawford had committed bigamy when he married Lily, which meant that marriage was void from the start. "This is it," Granger said, spreading the documents out on his desk. "This is what we need. Crawford's marriage to your wife was never legal. She was never truly his wife, which means she could not have stolen from him because she had no legal connection to him or his property. And if we can prove he knew about the prior marriage, we can have him arrested for bigamy and fraud." "Can you prove it?" Isaac asked. "The investigator is working on tracking down the woman in Chicago now," Granger said. "If she is willing to testify, we have him. And even if she will not, we have enough evidence to create serious doubt about the validity of his claim. I am going to send all of this to the marshal's office in St. Louis, along with a formal complaint. With any luck, they will drop the charges against your wife and start investigating Crawford instead." Isaac rode home with hope blazing in his chest for the first time in weeks. When he told Lily the news, she collapsed into his arms, crying tears of relief and joy. "Is it really over?" she asked. "Could it really be over?" "I think so," Isaac said, holding her tight. "Granger is filing everything today. Within a few weeks, we should have confirmation that the charges have been dropped." And indeed, 3 weeks later, Sheriff Morrison rode out to the ranch with a telegram. The charges against Lily Thorne, formerly Lily Kensington, had been officially dropped. Furthermore, Richard Crawford was now wanted for bigamy, fraud, and embezzlement. A warrant had been issued for his arrest, and the marshals were actively looking for him. "You are free," Morrison said, handing Lily the telegram. "Completely and totally free. That man has no claim on you, legal or otherwise." Lily read the telegram with shaking hands, then looked up at Isaac with such joy and relief on her face that it took his breath away. "It is over," she whispered. "It is really over. It is over," Isaac confirmed, pulling her into his arms. "You are safe, you are free, and you are mine, and nothing is ever going to change that." That night, they celebrated with Mrs. Chen and the ranch hands, a joyful gathering full of laughter and relief. Later, after everyone had gone to bed, Isaac and Lily sat together on the porch, wrapped in blankets against the cool spring night, looking up at the stars. "I keep thinking I am going to wake up and find this was all a dream," Lily said softly, nestled against Isaac's side. "That I am going to be back in that house in St. Louis, trapped and terrified." "It is not a dream," Isaac said, kissing the top of her head. "This is real, we are real, and you are never going back there." "I know," Lily said. "I am starting to believe it finally. I am free, and I am home." "You are home," Isaac agreed, "and I am never letting you go." As spring turned to summer, life on the Thorne ranch settled into a peaceful rhythm. Lily bloomed in the warm weather, spending her days working alongside Isaac on the ranch, tending to the garden she had planted and helping Mrs. Chen with the house. She was happy in a way she had never been before, free and safe and deeply loved. In June, Lily discovered she was pregnant. She told Isaac one evening after dinner, taking his hand and placing it on her still flat stomach. "We are going to have a baby," she said, her eyes shining with joy and a little bit of fear. "Are you happy?" "Happy," Isaac said, his voice choked with emotion. "Lily, I am beyond happy. I am overjoyed. We are going to be parents." He swept her up into his arms, spinning her around until she laughed and begged him to put her down before they both got dizzy. That night, they lay in bed making plans for their growing family, talking about names and what kind of parents they wanted to be. "I want our children to grow up knowing they are loved," Lily said, "knowing they are safe and cherished and that they can be whoever they want to be." "They will know all of that," Isaac promised, "because they will have you as a mother, and that is the greatest gift anyone could ask for." The pregnancy was not easy. Lily suffered from terrible morning sickness for the first few months, and there were days when she could barely keep anything down. But Isaac and Mrs. Chen took care of her, and gradually she began to feel better. By the time summer turned to fall, she was glowing with health, her belly rounding with their child. In late October, news came that Richard Crawford had been apprehended in New Orleans, trying to board a ship to Europe. He had been extradited back to St. Louis to face charges. The trial was swift, and the evidence overwhelming. Crawford was found guilty on multiple counts of fraud and embezzlement, and sentenced to 15 years in prison. The woman in Chicago, whose name was Margaret, testified that he had married her and then disappeared with her savings, leaving her destitute. When Isaac told Lily the news, she cried, but this time from pure relief. The man who had terrorized her, who had tried to kill her, would spend the next decade and a half behind bars. She would never have to fear him again. "It is finally over," she said, leaning into Isaac's embrace. "The nightmare is truly over and I can just be happy. I can just live." "You can," Isaac said, kissing her softly. "And I am going to spend every day of the rest of my life making sure you stay happy." Their son was born in January of 1877, on a cold, clear day with snow falling softly outside the windows. The birth was long and difficult, and there were moments when Isaac feared he might lose both Lily and the baby. But Mrs. Chen and the doctor worked tirelessly, and finally, just as dawn was breaking, Isaac heard the most beautiful sound in the world, his son's first cry. They named him James, after Isaac's father, with the middle name Edward after Lily's father. He was perfect, with a shock of dark hair and his mother's green eyes. Isaac held him for the first time with tears streaming down his face, overwhelmed with love for this tiny person who was part of him and part of Lily. "He is beautiful," Isaac whispered, looking down at his son's tiny face. "Lily, we made this. We made this perfect little person." "We did," Lily said, exhausted but radiantly happy. "We made our family." Raising a baby on a ranch was challenging, but they managed it together. Isaac proved to be a devoted father, taking overnight feedings so Lily could rest, changing diapers without complaint, and spending hours rocking James to sleep. Lily was a natural mother, patient and loving, and James thrived under their care. As James grew from a baby to a toddler, he became the center of their world. He took his first steps in the ranch yard, with both parents cheering him on. He said his first word, Dada, which made Isaac grin for days despite Lily's mock protests that she had done all the hard work of carrying and birthing him. He was a happy, curious child, always exploring, always getting into mischief. 2 years after James was born, Lily gave birth to their daughter, whom they named Emma Rose. She had her father's dark hair but her mother's delicate features, and from the moment she was born, she had her father wrapped around her tiny finger. Isaac doted on both his children, but there was something special about having a daughter, a little girl who looked up at him with complete trust and adoration. Life was not always easy. There were hard years when the cattle prices dropped, seasons when the weather was cruel, times when money was tight and they had to scrimp and save. But they faced it all together, Isaac and Lily, partners in every sense of the word. The ranch prospered under their joint management, with Lily proving to have a good head for business and Isaac's hard work ensuring they always had quality stock. The children grew, healthy and happy, surrounded by love and laughter. James inherited his father's love of ranching and could often be found trailing after Isaac, asking endless questions about the cattle and horses. Emma was more interested in books and learning, often curled up in her mother's lap while Lily read to her. They were different but equally loved, and the Thorne house was filled with joy. Mrs. Chen remained with them, a beloved part of the family, watching the children grow and helping to raise them. Jack stayed on as foreman, eventually marrying a widow from town and building a house on the edge of the property. The ranch hands came and went, but there was always a sense of family, of home, of belonging. Years passed, and the story of how Isaac and Lily met became a favorite tale in Newton. People spoke of the frozen, frightened woman who had arrived one bitter January day, and the cowboy who had caught her and promised she would thaw there. They spoke of how he had married her to protect her, and how that marriage of convenience had become one of the great love stories of the territory. Lily did thaw, just as Isaac had promised. The fear left her eyes completely, replaced by confidence and joy. The scars of her past never fully disappeared, but they faded, became part of her history rather than her defining feature. She became known throughout the county as a skilled horsewoman, a shrewd businesswoman, and a devoted mother and wife. She helped establish a school in Newton, wanting to ensure that all children, not just her own, had access to education. Isaac became one of the most respected ranchers in Kansas, known for his fair dealing and his quality livestock. But those who knew him well knew that his greatest pride was not his ranch or his reputation, but his family. He loved Lily with a devotion that never wavered, even as they both grew older and life settled into comfortable routine. He was a devoted father, always making time for his children no matter how busy the ranch kept him. On their 10th anniversary, Isaac took Lily back to the spot where he had first caught her outside the general store in Newton. They stood there together, older now but still deeply in love, remembering that cold January day that had changed both their lives. "You remember what I promised you?" Isaac asked, holding her hand. "You promised I would thaw here," Lily said, smiling up at him. "And you were right. I did thaw. You melted away all the fear and pain, and you gave me a life I never dreamed possible." "You gave me the same thing," Isaac said. "Before you, I was just going through the motions, but you brought color and joy and purpose to my life. You made me want to be better, do better." You made everything worthwhile. I love you, Isaac Thorne, Lily said, tears shining in her eyes. More than I ever thought it was possible to love someone. I love you too, Lily Thorne, Isaac said, pulling her into his arms. And I promise to keep loving you for all the days of my life. They kissed there in the street, not caring who saw, celebrating the love that had grown from the ashes of fear and desperation into something beautiful and enduring. More children came over the years. A third son, whom they named Thomas, arrived when Emma was 4. Then, 5 years later, when Lily thought they were done, twin girls were born, Alice and Catherine. The house was always full of noise and laughter and love. Isaac taught all his children to ride, to work the ranch, to respect the land and the animals. Lily taught them to read and write and think for themselves. Together, they raised children who were confident and capable and kind, who knew they were loved unconditionally. James grew up to take over the ranch eventually, working side by side with his father until Isaac was ready to step back. He married a schoolteacher from Newton, and they gave Isaac and Lily their first grandchildren. Emma went to college back east, becoming a teacher herself before returning to Kansas to start a school for girls. Thomas became a veterinarian, using his skills to help the ranchers throughout the county. Alice and Catherine were too young yet to know what they wanted, but whatever they chose, their parents would support them. Isaac and Lily grew old together, their love deepening with every passing year. They sat together on their porch in the evenings, watching the sunset over the prairie, holding hands just as they had when they were young. They told their grandchildren the story of how they met, of the cowboy who caught the frozen, frightened woman and promised she would thaw. And thaw she did. In the warmth of Isaac's love, in the safety of their home, in the joy of their family, Lily bloomed into the woman she was always meant to be. The scars of her past became part of her story, but they did not define her. She was defined instead by her strength, her courage, her capacity to love and be loved. Isaac kept every promise he ever made to her. She was safe, she was cherished, she was home. And in return, she gave him a life richer and more meaningful than he could have ever imagined. On their 50th wedding anniversary, surrounded by children and grandchildren and friends, Isaac and Lily renewed their vows. Their hands were weathered now, marked by decades of hard work, but they held each other with the same tenderness as they had on that hasty wedding day in the Newton courthouse. I promise to love you, Isaac said, his voice still strong despite his years, to honor you, to protect you, and to cherish you for all the days of my life. And I promise the same, Lily said, tears streaming down her face. You saved me, Isaac. You gave me everything. And I have loved you every single day since. And I you, Isaac said, kissing her softly to the cheers of their family. They lived many more good years together, watching their grandchildren grow, welcoming great-grandchildren, seeing their ranch prosper and expand. They faced the challenges that came with age together, supporting each other through illness and loss, never losing the deep connection that had formed that cold January day. When Isaac finally passed away, peacefully in his sleep at the age of 84, Lily grieved deeply. But she did not break. She had learned over their decades together that she was stronger than she ever knew. She continued to live on the ranch, surrounded by family, keeping Isaac's memory alive through stories and love. She lived another 5 years, long enough to see James's grandchildren born, to know that the legacy she and Isaac had built would continue for generations. And when she finally joined Isaac, slipping away quietly one spring morning with the prairie blooming outside her window, she went with a smile on her face and peace in her heart. They were buried side by side on a hill overlooking the ranch, under the wide Kansas sky they had both loved. Their children had a headstone carved with their names and the dates of their births and deaths, but also with a simple inscription that told their story. She arrived frozen and frightened. He promised she would thaw here, and in his love she bloomed. The story of Isaac and Lily Thorne became legend in Kansas, passed down through generations as an example of true love, of courage in the face of adversity, of the power of compassion and kindness. Their descendants continued to work the ranch, keeping it in the family, honoring the memory of the couple who had built it with love and determination. And on cold winter days, when the snow fell soft over the prairie and the wind howled through the eaves, people in Newton would remember the woman who had stumbled off the stagecoach all those years ago, frozen and frightened, and the cowboy who had caught her and changed both their lives forever. They would remember the promise he made and the life they built together, and they would smile, knowing that sometimes, against all odds, love really does conquer all. The Thorne Ranch stood for over a century, a testament to what Isaac and Lily had built together. Through depressions and droughts, through good times and bad, it endured, just as their love had endured. And though the world changed around it, though Kansas grew and modernized and the old ways faded, the story remained, a reminder that sometimes the greatest adventures begin with a single act of kindness, a promise made and kept, and two people brave enough to believe in love even when the world seems frozen and frightening. In the end, that is what mattered. Not the hardships they faced or the obstacles they overcame, but the love they shared and the family they created. Isaac had promised Lily she would thaw in Newton, Kansas, and she did. She thawed and bloomed and became everything she was meant to be, all because a cowboy with a kind heart caught her when she was falling and refused to let her go. And that love, that promise kept, echoed through the generations, a legacy more valuable than any ranch or fortune. It was a legacy of hope, of healing, of the transformative power of love given freely and without reservation. It was proof that sometimes, even in the darkest moments when everything seems lost and the cold seems unending, warmth can be found, safety can be found, home can be found. All it takes is someone willing to catch you when you fall, and promise that you will thaw here,